You're listening to Tax Savvy, the art and science of keeping more money in your pocket. Each episode, we uncover specialty tax strategies, share expert advice, and talk through practical insights businesses use to stay ahead. Whether you're here to learn more about specialty tax or just want to make smarter money moves, you're in the right place.
Welcome to Tax Savvy, a specialty tax podcast all about keeping more money in your pocket. Well, today is our very first episode, so no pressure on us to keep things interesting.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to talk things, tax, finances, you name it. We better keep it interesting, otherwise it's just going to be, just another podcast, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, luckily, we have the perfect man for the job today.
Thank you.
Jason Werner of Werner Financial, an independent financial firm who is all about growing investments and talking about taxes and saving money through different strategies there. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yep. I know you guys have a lot of individuals you could have on this, so I appreciate the chance to be on. So thank you so much.
Well, absolutely. So if you want, tell us a little bit about your background, how you got to where you're at today with your own firm.
Yeah, it's fairly a long story now. I definitely feel that, if you look back over the last 10 years, the way that our business has formed and changed is quite drastic. But even from the point of grad school and working for a small independent agent there in Lafayette, all the way to now, a lot of little changes that kind of got us to where we are, where we truly feel we have our own processes, our own product, a real independent niche where we now can do things outside of just advisory or, just money management or retirement planning, and it morphed into some tax planning efficiencies and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned right there that, the industry is changing, and that could not be a more true statement.
For sure.
Not only for our industry, but across the world.
Right.
What kind of sparked you from maybe just, start, you have your background in stocks, right?
Yeah.
So, maybe from, how'd you, figure out to maybe start expanding some other services? Did you just see that there was a need for your clients, or, what happened there?
Absolutely. And a great question. So I think that anytime someone starts off in this industry, it almost feels like you're on a route until you kind of know which unique way you want to go. Sure. So, but I'm glad that it went that way. So, it's right off the bat, you say, I want to own my own firm. I want to do these things, but what's that even mean? When you're 22, 23, how much knowledge and expertise do you really have to offer yet? Right. I thought it would be prudent, a good idea to say, hey, go work for a large firm. Go work for a large firm. Lots of other resources, lots of agents and advisors that have been doing this for a very long time. You get thrown in the fire a bit, right? You get to do things you like, things you don't like. But that's where you really start to say, what is different? What am I going to offer that might be different? After about 2.5 years, I definitely felt like I knew enough to go want to do my own thing. But once you make that jump, I think it's very important for an advisor in this world to say, what makes me different, right?
Sure.
So not saying that everybody plays in the same sandbox, but I feel that it is not uncommon for individuals in our seat to say that, hey, our competitors maybe do a lot of the same things, maybe not, but what is that? I did notice in my first maybe 3 to 5 years of being independent that a lot of products were similar as far as, what certain firms, not naming any, but some firms would offer. I decided somewhere around 2015, 16 to say, what? We don't want to do broad-based indexes. We don't want to put everybody in just S&P funds, right? If you're paying a percent or you're paying an advisor, what are you getting in the advisory side? Just the money management side. What are you getting for that? So my partners and I, we started putting a tilt towards saying, hey, let's build our own portfolios. Right? That'll make us different. Right. That piece will make us different. So that alone, I felt like made us different. But then at the end of the day, I would have clients that, sure, they love the rate of return. Sure, they love the meetings and they love the planning. But they'd also come back and say, hey, what about this? Or like, my tax bill or something else. I thought it was all about this one piece of the pie, and it's not. There's other pieces that would funnel into the full advisory piece. So I felt like along the way, we would address these things that were able to be done on an independent side that I really didn't know were possible until you're in the business long enough. So just that experience meant, hey, if client X, Y, and Z says, my taxes, we're only talking about the investment side at that point. So we need to add to it, right? Which sparks, hey, how do I figure out how to maybe solve that for other people, which opens the door to all kinds of other things, as you know.
Right.
So the journey really started where clients were really addressing, hey, I like this that you're doing, but you could kind of see there was a scratch that wasn't being itched on the other side.
Right.
We said, hey, why don't we do that, right? Why don't we surround ourselves with resources that can help that with them too?
Exactly, too. And, correct me if I'm wrong on this, too. A lot of discussions that we've had is, those other things that maybe, they just weren't in a good situation or well-structured or organized.
Sure.
I think a lot of that was preventing from what you guys were able to do too, right?
Yeah, for sure.
did that help expand of what you guys started to see in that market?
It did.
Yeah.
It did. And sometimes I want to be very polite when you say this too. Sometimes people, their current setups, maybe we weren't doing anything but the money management, or maybe it was just the 401k, or maybe just the retirement, the income planning. But maybe because there was something inefficient that was already set up on their side, it wasn't wrong by any stretch of imagination, but boy, it could have been way more right. Based on what that client was saying, right? Mm-hmm. So then it says, hey, I have a tax problem. What are you doing for your tax planning? Nothing. Well, that doesn't make sense, right? So how do we do that?
Right.
So other people not doing some of those things, so like, okay, that is an absolute something that could be addressed. And it doesn't mean necessarily like, hey, let's make sure they do these 10 things. What can they do? That homework in itself, just educating a client of, hey, did you know that based on what you're doing, these 10 things are out there? Right. Hey, based on how you're set up, did you know if you just change this one little thing, you save X amount of dollars?
Right.
Those are massive pieces of value that we weren't doing until we realized it was a massive market that we needed to make sure we were doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and luckily we've been able to work together in our firms and help save a few clients significant money.
Yes. So, and I'll even elaborate on that. So even that, for something that I have understood in your world for a long time on paper, did not have the resources or individuals partner with to say, well, I know that this is a big deal. How do I make that happen? Right. So we started small, right? Let's start with understanding how people should be set up, right? They're set up efficiently, right? They're going to have more opportunity to save. Well, then what are those other things? Okay, if they're taking their income in these 2 or 3 ways, is there ways that I can make that less taxable, right?
Right.
Can I add specific expenses in there that are legitimate that would benefit in this realm or not? It wasn't until maybe 2022, 23, where I said, hey, there is even a bigger ticket or a more efficient way to save by doing other things, which where you guys came in, which is, again, it's just another vertical that luckily you bump into those people that can help bring it to what you offer.
Yeah, absolutely. So, no, I think we've done a lot of cost seg work together.
Yeah.
So, it's the first project comes to mind is, all the self-storage units.
Yes.
And we're giggling almost after the call because you go, wait, you can do that on self-storage units?
Exactly.
And, you
just
see the light bulb go off.
Right. And you only know what you know. So when we're running a client through, we think we're doing a great job of going through saying, hey, look at all that we can save. But that is how do you step over that last piece that also says, oh, by the way, based on them having storage units or based on them having a couple buildings that they all, operate out of.
Yeah.
So again, I remember being probably more giddy than the client was, knowing that, hey, there's an additional piece that can be saved. But again, unless somebody is pushing towards making sure that is captured, how do you know it even exists?
Right, exactly.
So it is so imperative to, I'm glad we met.
Yeah, right.
To make sure that that's on the docket.
Yeah, and through that, specific client, what they were going through is they hadn't filed taxes in a few years.
Correct.
They were looking at a massive tax bill.
Mm-hmm.
They were growing their real estate portfolio significantly, which ties up cash.
Sure.
Right. So, they were in a really tough position of being able to operate on the day-to-day aspects.
Yeah.
And as we continue to go through the education process, like you just mentioned, say, hey, we were able to have a good discussion and talk about, what the client's problem is. Are there any solutions or is there anything that we could do to help, number one, save some money.
Yeah.
Number two, help free up cash.
Yes.
And, cost seg came into play there.
It was.
I think the numbers ended up being pretty significant. We knocked about a little over $200K
it was over,
off the tax bill.
Yeah, over $200,000 off the tax bill. And this individual specifically was almost on an all stop. They had been doing the hard part, building and practice, but not going back to saying, am I, logistically set up correctly to keep capturing and doing this growth?
Right.
Oh, by the way, your tax bill is so significant that you can't keep going. You have to stop and almost look back. So to know that not only like, hey, you can save a little bit more than we thought, significantally change the next 5 to 10 years of their plan based on adding that to it. So again, we were thrilled, but imagine how the client felt.
Exactly. And, it is cool too. We just had a conversation a couple of weeks ago where they went and bought a few more properties as a result of the work that we've done.
Sure.
It was cool to see. It's helped showing maybe in real life on how the strategies we helped implement and help grow their business.
Which I would ask you too. So you got to imagine we're on the part where we bring our stuff to you saying, hey, help us. Right. We think there might be something here, help us. You also work hand in hand with CPAs, advisors and whatnot. What I always try to wrap my brain around, like I said, being polite, but try to wrap my brain around is we had, received this client and they had worked with other great professionals, but for one reason or not, this piece was either missed or just not focused on. Do you experience that a lot?
All the time. I would say in the realm of specialty tax, it is so far overlooked. It's a good thing and a bad thing, right? You don't ever want to see people missing out on an opportunity like that too. But it is also very fulfilling when you can meet these people and bring the options to the table and show the significant impact that you can make for them.
Sure.
So it's a double-edged sword, I guess you could
say.
It
is. I always ask the question, like, I'm glad that it wasn't done, right? Because we get to come in, I essentially save the day a little bit. But it is one of those things I try to wrap my brain around. If they'd been, how did they get this far with really no one addressing it, right? And I'm not saying do it. I'm not saying, why did someone make them do this? Why wasn't this presented to them as an option along the way to make sure, hey, this valve can be pressed, right? This can be done to make sure that you're I guess you're functioning as efficient as possible.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day too, it comes down to having a high quality advisor.
Yes,
that can identify, help identify those opportunities. I think we mentioned today's world is just changing so much,
right?
And I think with that, time is being shrunk for many people.
Sure.
So items like this are just being overlooked.
Two pieces I would add to that too. I think that people know it's a thing, right? I think people know that, hey, if you buy specific investments, hey, there could be significant tax deduction. I don't think they understand that, hey, a cost seg or a certain, I guess, process has to go with it in order for that to happen.
Right.
And I also do not think they understand the exact amount that they can take advantage of, right? All I think they associate is, if I do this, I get a tax break. To what degree? How does it get done?
Right.
So there might be a little paralysis of analysis there of, there's something I could do, but how? What do I even do it?
Right.
If there's nobody on their side too saying, oh, yes, you can do this, here's exactly how much. Because I will say one thing that makes it a little bit of a no-brainer is if anybody walks them through it, then illustrates it. Show me, if I do this, what's it look like? If I don't do this, what's it look like?
Exactly, right?
Yeah, so makes it a little bit of a no-brainer on that end. But I was curious, in your world, I mean, you get to talk to us every time we bug you. I can only imagine how many people in our boat or CPAs, that you get to deal with. I always wonder their take on this because sometimes it does seem like a no-brainer.
Yeah. So, and you're going to get my tax answer always, right?
Sure.
You've heard me say this probably 10,000 times if it depends,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And, it depends on everyone's individual situations, but we can come in and help advise and coach on that.
For sure.
Yeah. So, as, we're going to shift a little bit, as, over the next 5 to 10 years, what advice would you have for people who can take advantage of, both our different types of services, of things they should be aware of, and where do they see, maybe the market going?
Sure. And I love this question. Again, I don't mean to be, give my it depends answer, but I always, from our experience, it's not just saying, hey, make sure in 3 years you do this, or hey, don't miss this, right? Hey, don't miss the AI boom. Don't miss investing in this stock. It's not that simple. What I've noticed is people sometimes miss opportunity because they're not educated in the sense of, hey, if you know there's something that could benefit your practice of your business, know what that is and know how it works, right? So educate yourself. Make sure, and that does not mean do something. It just means understand it, learn about it. I don't know, my personality is anytime I hear something, even if my ears go up, say that can't be real or that sounds great, I want to know if it's real or not because I want to know if that affects me. How does that apply to my business?
Sure.
So I think that the first is for any individual or even a business professional, understand what you can even do with education. Make sure you're surrounding yourself with people or professionals that can educate you.
You nailed it. I think something we always like to coach people on is we don't need you to be the expert in the space, right? Just know enough to be dangerous and understand how it impacts you. Right. And then surround yourself with the experts who are going to put you in the best possible position.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And it's our job. And I'm not even knocking our industry, right? Because we want to make sure we're proving with rate of return, how are we helping you feel that you're doing with your plan? Are we hitting projections, results? Are we accessible? But also making sure that, we are doing the homework, right? We essentially say, you could probably figure this out if you sat around and did it all day, but that's our job to make sure we have that information ready to discuss. Sure. So for people to make sure that understand, surround yourself with individuals that can at least give you information, but educate yourself enough to know that if something comes around, you know what that is, right? You can take advantage of it.
Sure.
And also be able to be, able to take care of that. I went back earlier, either structure or setup. We have a lot of people that say that would be nice to, maybe invest in a syndicate, maybe invest in a certain fund, maybe invest in a certain project, but they're not even set up to do so if that opportunity arises.
Right.
So I would say, just make sure you educate yourself in a way that, hey, you understand all the things that are open to you, whether you do them or not, you're prepared.
Sure.
And then be structured enough if something comes around, you can pounce on it, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it could be tomorrow. It could be in 2 weeks. It could be in 3 years.
Sure.
But sometimes those conversations aren't even always about action. It's just if something comes around, could I take action type thing?
Right.
So yeah, I wish I could nail down maybe 2 or 3 things, but I'm just so, I guess I'm passionate about making sure know if you can do something, and if something comes around, be able to pounce on it.
Yeah, and basically just what I heard is you don't have a crystal ball,
No,
but
I do. Yeah, agreed.
But you want to be able to help people as a part of your guys' process to structure themselves and put themselves in a position, number one, to either continue doing what they're doing, make sure they're in a good spot, or number two, and make sure they have the wherewithal to be able to pivot if needed.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So is that part of your guys' process when you guys do your firm? When maybe if you're onboarding a client or have an existing client, is part of that onboarding is saying, hey, here's your current situation. Here's what we recommend changing, and then lay out a full plan for them.
I love, so again, that comes down to process and product, right? Product, what do we offer? How can we impact you with actual action? Process, what is that strategy where you come in and we can actually now say what things either need to be kept or changed, right? We don't work on the assumption that if someone comes in our office, let's shake this all up. Let's change it all around. That original analysis is to say, what needs to even be done based on what they're trying to accomplish. So we love to do that first due diligence, find out what it is you're trying to accomplish. We grade everything out, right? Whether it's an investment, whether it's a tax plan, a long-term income plan, is it a legacy plan? And then we say, if you keep doing what you're doing right now, what's it look like? And then we say, but if you're trying to get to X, here's the differences, right? But then we have to list what are those things that would make that difference.
Sure.
So that usually drives either action or thought to inaction. But either way, you're having that conversation to see, how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes it is a series of 3 or 4 conversations before you actually do something.
Yeah.
But the good news is, and I think we've done a great job over the last 8 years through the process that we do, you can see it. And I said selfishly, I'm going to say for myself as a business owner, I like to say, okay, this sounds good. Show me if I don't do it. And if I do implement this, what is the difference tangibly, right?
Right.
Can't guarantee it, of course. But the point is, give me an idea of what the benefit would be if I was to make it happen.
Yeah.
Right? So we like to show that.
And both of our firms work very similarly on that, right? Yeah. Very upfront saying, if you make this change, here is the most likely impact you'll have.
Yes.
And, really checking those boxes, so to speak, before they move forward with anything of saying, hey, let's make sure this is actually going to benefit you.
Yes. Yeah. Well, people need to see it. People actually need to see it.
Right.
Like I said, a lot of people, whether they hear it on social media or a podcast or a friend talking at lunch, hey, this can save you taxes. It sounds good.
Right.
Until someone shows you on paper, like, hey, here's the number.
Right.
So I told you the straight way to my arm was your analysis. You said it right here. First chart is, here are projections on a conservative, moderate, aggressive, but it tied a number to the action. If I can see what I actually might be saving, it justifies it, right? Yeah. So otherwise, it's just hard to wrap your brain around it. If you can't really picture you doing it, you don't do anything.
Shocking. An accountant of finance numbers. No way. We'd never guess that.
Well, show me analysis, please. No,
right?
No.
Yeah.
But again, they don't lie, though. Again, the hypothetical, even though it's hypothetical math, it still doesn't lie. You can't change. If you average this percent and you got this far, that's what you're going to get.
Right.
I still think people drag their feet on some of these things. And they can't fathom how it really impacts them until someone shows them.
Right. Yeah. So Jason, we're going to shift gears here a little bit. Sure. So let's talk about maybe, a time when you guys had a client where you recommended one of our strategies, cost seg, utility sales tax exemptions, or an R&D credit.
Yeah.
And there's maybe been some hesitant nature by the client or some obstacles you've had to overcome with it.
Sure. And like I said, so our process, we go through, we know with our resources and our backing, and, we go through checkpoints of set up correctly, best ways of distribution, and it gets down to this part. And again, I can think of another client specifically that, they operate, I guess, in the food industry, let's say. And over the last 3 or 4 years, the last year and a half, essentially, have acquired more buildings to operate out of, right? They're growing quickly. So when they got to us, they already had a team. I'm not sure where the disconnect was, but essentially this looked like a big opportunity on paper. So that's where we contact, you and your team and say, hey, what are we missing here? But it sounds like there was a massive opportunity for them because they do have these buildings. So again, coming back to you, I'm not sure why it wasn't brought up. And maybe it's one of those like, hey, we look at this differently or it's down the road. Something like that, it was a no-brainer and it looks good for them. Going to end of 25 is going to look great. What would you say is why maybe somebody wouldn't pounce on that early, or any idea of why that might not be a part of the immediate plan by the time it got to us?
Yeah, everyone has their own unique situation. In this specific situation, with this client, I think they had so many irons in the fire. They were growing rapidly, not only with their own, restaurants and locations, but then they also had expanding to other people. They were trying to franchise out, right?
Correct. Yeah.
They just had so much going on, and I think their accountants were just maybe prioritizing
for sure
some other things going on in their business. And it's not uncommon for fixed assets to kind of maybe be thrown on the side or overlooked.
Sure.
I think in this client, they had so much going on that, correct me if I'm wrong, they didn't even depreciate the buildings.
Correct. And I think not our mistake. It's just it comes with an assumption. We were under the impression they might have already, or, hey, I'm sure this is underway somehow, or there's been some type of presentation along, hey, take advantage of this. Because again, as we get into this more, you start to uncover opportunities. It seemed like one. But yeah, you're right. So by the time you got back to us, when we convey that message to them, as far as just the analysis, not saying do a thing at all, their eyes lit up like, we can do what? Right? It wasn't even part of their plan.
Yeah.
So that's part, I like those types because you go through your checklist and some of those big ticket items are some of the cost seg in the building.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and there's every situation is different too. Right. At least for our situation, we run into where people might only hold a building for 1 to 2 years, sure. And recapture is going to be a major issue in those instances.
I was going to ask you, is there any pushback? Anything? There's a negative to anything, right? You got to play both sides. Is that probably one of the reasons people?
Yeah, recapture is typically one of the largest, I would say, roadblocks for cost seg. I mean, if you're going to only hold for a year or two, sure. We tell people not to do it. The last thing we want to do is be pushing a service that people can't utilize, right?
But again, part of the analysis.
Exactly. Yeah. But those are things we like to do up front, though. We make sure what their plans are. And, if they say they're unsure, so they're 50-50, we always say, hey, okay, let's talk in a year.
Sure.
And maybe they've have more solidified plans of holding or things like that. Sure. So, and then I would say number two, people might be a little bit skeptical, too good to be true type deal. Yeah. And, but once we show, the backing of what we do, how widely accepted it is, and how it is the only preferred method for accelerating depreciation by the IRS, usually people will open up about that or open up to it after that. So,
and that's the term, I think, if people come in our office with the idea of that implementation, they've heard accelerated depreciation, or I can take how much off of this, right? But again, it still comes back to not knowing exactly how much and how to get it done.
Exactly.
Or if I do this, right? If this is something that I implement, how do I make sure it's correct? How do I make sure that I didn't mess it up? Or, that kind of
and it's funny. You just totally remind me of something that comes up all the time with us is just, there's so much tax strategy being broadcasted on the internet and whatever. And, people come to us and ask questions and say, well, I saw this guy on Instagram tell me this, and
it makes you cringe sometimes, but I am glad because I will say this: it does at least put the seed in people's mind of what is that
exactly,
right? And what is that? Because that does give us a chance to be more like, well, half right. It's something, but here's how it's implemented. So even though sometimes you see those who are like, oh.
Exactly,
but it is neat that it gets information out there. Honestly, sometimes that's the little tick that makes somebody ask.
Agreed, and it's you can come in and show, okay, yes, that is a real strategy, but here's everything that comes along with it. Are you prepared to be able to document all this? Or do you have the required hours maybe you need for something, right? Yeah. So us being able to come in and show, hey, there's a lot more to it than just buying a property than writing the whole thing off.
Absolutely, yes.
So, but it's really fun though for like your clients there in that situation where helping them get more organized.
Yes.
Structured in a way to continue to grow, but then also being able to implement and utilize services like ours to help them save some dollars along the way.
Yep. And then your analysis of saying, if you do it this way, here's what it looks like, or looking more than just the immediate 3 to 5 months, maybe it's a 2 to 3 year play. Again, they take that information, and again, it's only going to impact how they move forward, in the next year or two.
Right.
So those are two great examples of just game changers of it was already on the table, but not really knowing how to get it done. The analysis itself and the expertise said, oh, here's how you do it. Change both of them. Honestly.
Right. Yeah, and the beauty of what we do too is that if it's not a now, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's always available in the future.
Yeah. At least you know.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, hopefully this podcast gets to a few people who are missing out and,
absolutely.
And they learn about what we both do to help themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Well, Jason, this has been a wonderful conversation.
Appreciate it.
Really excited to have you on for our first episode.
Yeah, thank you. And
it was a great conversation.
I know a number of others could have been here, so I really do appreciate it. So.
Absolutely. So, and for all the folks watching and listening, we're going to drop your firm's details.
Appreciate that.
In the link and part of the podcast.
Sure.
So hopefully you'll have a few people reach out.
That'd be great.
Hopefully you can help a few people.
Absolutely. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason.